again, doing another video yet again about the topic of racism and about the topic of Black Lives and Black Lives Matter and everyone's lives matter. Yet again, we turn on social media, the news, whatever you want to call it, whichever platform you're viewing, to witness, unfortunately, yet another black man being victimised brutally, okay, to the point where he's lost his life. The implication of that particular incident has had certain ramifications all the way through. We've seen and witnessed huge amounts of protests, which have resulted in even a police officer, now being fired. Prior to that, nothing was happening. It saddens me that I'm speaking about this topic yet again, when over the last period of time, over the last period of couple of months, this has been a reoccurring thing. And it's sad to witness that at the age of 42, racism doesn't seem to be improving. Racism doesn't seem to be eradicating. It doesn't seem to be vanishing at all from our minds, from our lives, from daily occurrences. If anything, sadly, it seems to be increasing. I'm not sure why. I'm not sure what the solution is either. I'm purely just putting these thoughts out there that something needs to change. Unfortunately, there seems to be this continuous knock-on effect. We see video footage released of a previous victim of racism and police brutality. We see knock-on effects of other individuals that have been targeted purely because of the colour of their skin. And it gets to a point where you can be stood there in aghast watching the ramifications of people looting, people protesting, whether peacefully or not. There's a part of you that in your conscious mind is saying, the lootings are wrong. They are wrong. However, you can also relate to the individuals that are in that particular predicament and are continuing to act that way. I'm not justifying their acts. I'm stating part of me as a human being can understand, because for so long there seems to be no improvement. So long they've been frustrated. This frustration of injustice, this frustration of not being heard. And that calls on to another topic about the importance of voice.
To stop this chaos.
It ain't me. It's not me. I'm gonna let y'all know that now. It's not us guys neither. And I'm glad that y'all said that. It's not us. It's the police. This the madness that they spark up. This is what they encourage. This is what they provoke. This is what you get out of you taking a loved one from someone. This is what you get. You get a lot of people that's hurt, and they can't vent the right way. They can no longer depend on the police to be here to protect us like they say they gonna do. So this is what you get. And no, it's not gonna end today. I can't tell you it's gonna end tomorrow. I don't know when it's gonna end. But it's for y'all to start. We're not the ones that's killing us. Y'all killing us. We can't make a change if y'all don't change.
Recently, there's been footage of a woman who decided to call the police purely because a gentleman happened to be walking in a park and asked her to put a leash on her dog. Her reaction, her gut reaction, without even thinking through logically, let me just listen to this man's request. It was an act of defiance, and it was an act of pure racist motives, where she calls the police and claims to be victim in regards to this man allegedly or potentially is going to attack her. Obviously, we can clearly see from the footage that he's, recorded, that is not the case. But it begs me to question the importance of voice in this particular scenario and in this particular predicament. This woman is able to play victim. She knows what to do. She knows how to use her voice and to project it and to play the victim mode, and to also be able to justify her actions by being hysterical, obviously falsifying, the evidence quite clearly in front of her. Are we shocked? No, unfortunately. Unfortunately not, because the law, the courts, everything seems to be on the side of one particular individual and not the other. Now, there's been consequences for that woman involved. There's been consequences and ramifications. She's lost her job, I believe. She's lost the dog that was involved. There's been quite a lot of ramifications, and some of it quite rightly so. But it also makes you look at things from a different perspective as well. Why does she feel able to put herself in that position where she can justify making that call, even though quite clearly it is being falsified? What is it about the power of her voice over mine and yours when we speak our truth? Why is her voice heard more than ours? This makes us go forward to the current situation where the gentleman sadly lost his life in regards to the policeman, kneeling on his body, resulting in his death. Repeatedly, he says, "I can't breathe, I can't breathe, I can't breathe." Now, prior to his sad departure, he does voice his concerns. He does voice his worries. He does voice his issues. Are they heard? No. Why not? Why is another individual's voice heard, mentioned, listened to, but this man's isn't? And as I've already said repeatedly, sadly, he lost his life. This is unfortunately not the first time, it's not going to be the last time, where a young man, it can be a child, it can be a woman of colour, loses their life. But for what reason? Because their colour pigmentation is different from yours, the way they look is different to yours, the way they behave, the way they react, the way they would go about living their daily lives is different to yours. Correct me if I'm wrong, I thought we had an emancipation of, freedom. We had an emancipation of the past. Aren't people meant to be free? Free to go about their lives, free to go and do the daily business, whether it's to go into a shop, whether it's to go to a cafe, whether it's just to go and call upon a neighbour. I appreciate that things are tough, things are hard because of COVID, but the world seems to be getting extremely agitated and extremely defiant, and to the point of there's no justice. That's how it appears to be to the rest of us from an ethnic minority. It doesn't matter which country you are in, we are witnessing the abhorrent actions of people that are meant to be in a position of justice, a position of patrolling our neighbourhoods and looking after us and making us feel safe. And sadly, people are not feeling safe anymore, hence they're reacting. Years ago, when I was in my early 20s, I will never forget it, but I had an incident with the police myself. And you might think, well, why are you mentioning it? Well, it could have gone two different ways. I happened to be going to a job interview, and I must have been something like 23, 24 years old, something like this. I'm 42 now. But I'll never forget that moment, because incidences like this that I'm watching on the news always have that little voice at the back of my head for me, that my situation could have gone a completely different way. I went for a job interview. I was in an area that was not familiar to me. I had pulled up in my car and I had stopped on a side street. And back in those days, you didn't have GPS, you didn't have mobile phones to search for the area. You didn't have Google Maps, you didn't have, like sat-nav, things like that to help you see where you're going. So you had something called the A to Z Atlas. And I pulled up in a sensible place, no double yellow lines, because in England, if you pull up on double yellow lines, you'll get a ticket. You're not supposed to park there. So I made sure I'm in a safe place, and I probably was about 5 minutes. My engine is running for the car because I know that the place I'm going to for my interview is not far. It's just that I don't happen to know the street of where I'm meant to be. So I'm in my car, the engine is running, and as I'm looking through the atlas, you know, sort of looking through it, I can see in my mirror there's a police car not far off behind me, and I can sense this police officer is watching me. So anyway, I'm reading my map, I'm looking at the road signs, I'm trying to figure out where exactly I need to go. And obviously, you're back in those days, you're not allowed, like you are now, you're not allowed to read a map or atlas and then obviously pull away and drive. So for me, I'm looking at what I'm doing, okay? And then I see in my rearview mirror that the police officer has now approached my car. Okay, now remember, I'm not parked on double yellow lines, I'm not blocking anybody's driveway, I'm not acting, you know, wrong, I guess, whatever wrong means. I've not done anything that's broken the law. I've literally pulled in, I'm reading a map, I'm trying to figure out where I'm going, and I get a top on the window. And obviously I wind the window down and look at the police officer, and he asks me to switch my engine off. I do so. This was my first interaction with the police, by the way, and thankfully, touch wood, touch a bit wood, the last. But he says to me, "What are you doing here?" So I said, "I'm looking for this particular school. I'm in an area, by the way, called Castleford. It was an area called Airedale, which I didn't know was rough. I think it still has the reputation of being rough." And the police officer is saying to me, "Have you got identification with you? Can you explain who you are, where you're going?" So I said, "Right, I'm a teacher. I'm on my way to a job interview." Obviously, I'm dressed in a suit at this point, okay? That shouldn't make any difference, but obviously I'm just trying to explain that I'm not doing any wrong. So the police officer says to me, "You know, can you step out of the vehicle? Can you show me proof of who you are?" Now, back in those days, I didn't actually drive around with my driving license with me. Nobody actually does, or still doesn't, I don't think. But the point was, I did exactly what I said, what I was told, got out of the vehicle, and he's then starts saying these particular things to me, which personally I found very, 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 very bizarre. Very bizarre. And there were things like this. Once I'd obviously confirmed my name, he was saying, "Well, the car matches you, and the driving license that you happen to have given me, the only reason I happened to have that identification with me was I was on my way to the job interview. Sometimes they ask for identification for the job, you know, say you're successful with in the job, they want proof of who you are for HR purposes." So luckily for me, I happened to have that with me. I gave him the identification. He went back to his police car, checked it on the speaker, came back, and he was like, "Okay, so you are who you say you are?" It's like, "Yeah." And this is way before we had like photo ID. So he was like, "You are who you say you are. I've checked everything with your car. You've got fully comp license." I was like, "Yeah, I'm meant to have, you know, my license. You've got fully comp insurance." Yes. Nothing is wrong with your vehicle. In fact, your vehicle is a really nice vehicle. Now, we're talking about a Ford Fiesta that was a J-Reg, for those of you that remember, way back in the day. It meant nothing. But to this police officer, he profiled me. He profiled my car. He profiled everything about it. Back in those days, I know some people, for example, were getting pulled up for the smallest little bit of tail light that had gone out. Nothing was wrong with my car. My car was my baby, and I made sure I looked after it. So he was saying, you know, there's nothing wrong with your car. There's no lights out. You've kept it in good condition. I could see that your tires are all okay, because that was another one. Sometimes they would pull you up on your tire pressure or the fact that your tires were going bald. I knew my car, there was nothing wrong with my car. Anyway, so he's saying all these things to me, and I'm thinking, why has he pulled me up? Why? Why has he stopped me? And then we got to it. He said, "Madam, I've pulled you over because you have all these correct things in place. I want to know what you're doing in this area." I said, "I'm really confused. I don't get it." He said, "Well, your identification checks out, your vehicle is in a good status, your vehicle actually is extremely rich for this neighbourhood. So I'm really confused at this point. I'm not really getting what he's on about. Later on I do. And he's saying to me, you know, you're in the wrong area. Okay, for someone who claims to be a teacher, and I can see you've got the evidence there in front of you, you are in the wrong area. What are you doing here? I said, I'm for a job interview. I'm going to this particular school. And he's like, oh, okay, let me just make something clear to you. At the moment, this particular area that you're in is a drug capital, okay? And it is known for notoriously having people in gangs, in little warfares. People are either selling drugs or buying drugs, and you possibly could have been one of those people. That's why I'm checking you out. However, your identification, as I said to you before, checks out. Your past checks out. You are who you say you are. And I believe your story. So tell me where it is that you need to go, and I'll help you get there. Now, I had to sort of like take a step back thinking, what the hell? Because that had never happened to me before, okay? And he ended up driving me to my school with the flashing lights on in that neighbourhood. And I'll never forget it. I haven't forgotten it, obviously, for 20 years plus, because had I been somewhere else, had I been in a different predicament, had this police officer profiled me in a very, very different way, things would have been different for me, and things would have been probably different for him, perhaps, okay? But the point was that when I got to the school, when he got me there, and that, you know, the flashing lights were flashing away, he pulled up into the school driveway. The head teacher, I remember, with other members of staff, were outside waiting for me to obviously appear, and here I am getting like a police escort, which doesn't look good when you're going for a job interview, by the way. But, you know, the police officer said to the head teacher, can you confirm that this, you know, this woman is here for an interview? So again, there was that little bit of mistrust from him. And the police officer was like, yes, 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 has she done anything wrong? Has she done anything wrong? You know, obviously, that would have been a big no-no to the job interview. So he says, no, she just happens to have pulled up in a place where really she shouldn't have pulled up. And after I've checked everything through, she's got everything right. It's just, I felt like it was my duty to make sure she got to the school safely. And obviously once he left, the head teacher just apologised and said, oh, I should have told you that we are in a very, very, very rough place. Now, I didn't take that job. But the reason I mention this story is because that situation for me could have been very, very different. Very different. From what I'm seeing in America, you know, the situation is before you've even had a chance to talk, before you've even had a chance to even voice, you know, who you are, what your concerns are, these are not being heard. And it saddens me, like I said, that you've got this emancipation, you've got this freedom, yet you're actually showing us that we haven't. Okay? And it's very, very concerning that these people that are carrying out these acts, this persecution of certain individuals of colour, because let's face it, that's what it is, they are being racially profiled, they're being targeted, and then on top of being targeted, there seems to be no remorse, no act of compassion, no act of just being a human being, you know. And remember, you are not the judge, okay? You are not the person that's making that final decision. You're not the jury. So for you to kneel over somebody very, very forcefully, okay, for a small discrepancy, whatever it is, you don't have the right to do that. This man is clearly being, you know, videoed, and it's been, you know, brought out there that he's repeatedly, bless him, before he dies, repeatedly says, I can't breathe, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. He voices his concerns, he voices his pain, he voices the situation, and people around him, the police officers that are around him, choose to ignore that. That's why people are angry, that's why people are venting, that's why people are unfortunately carrying out retributions, you know, by destroying the system, I guess, in their eyes. I'm not justifying it. I'm saying I can relate to why they're feeling that frustrated that they have to do something. Then in the other extreme, you know, as the riots have continued, you can see, you know, huge amounts of people basically at unrest. And like I said to you, I am not advocating the violence. I'm not advocating the protests. What I am saying is they've had enough. They've had enough of the system that isn't working. Even a CNN reporter is, you know, recorded live, given a broadcast, and he's trying to record the news. He's been given permission to record the news as it's happening. And at the back of him, you can see the riot police, and then he's arrested along with the crew. Now, thankfully, he's released the next day, but why did he even have to get to that stage? Something's not right, people. Something is really not right. You know, racism, I thought, would eradicate. Racism seems to be growing, and it's not getting better, sadly. It's not. It seems to be getting worse on a daily basis. It seems to be happening more and more frequently, which stipulates that there's a problem. And some of those issues can be resolved with people like me and you, but it also starts with the people above in power. Some of them are, you know, influencing it. Some of them, sadly, are vindicating it. Some of them are passionately saying, yeah, we've got this right to do this, this, this. No, you haven't. Okay, because you're leading it to hate. We don't want hate. We really don't want hate. We want love and peace, and we want to be able to get on with people in the world that we're living in. Life is tough and life is hard as it is, without being racially profiled, without being racially prejudiced and stereotyping, without judgment against one another, instead of acceptance and love and compassion. That seems to be out the window. And instead, we're seeing brutality. We're seeing our voices taken away. And that's a key thing. You know, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, even people like Maya Angelou, you know, these are people that have always inspired my life. And to keep witnessing these atrocities, when is it going to stop? When is it really going to stop? And when is it going to change for the better? Where we live, hopefully, with each other in peace and solidarity. Am I asking for too much? Can it be ratified? You know, can it be changed? Can it be ratified? Can it be eradicated slowly? Slowly. I'm not asking for it to go like that. I appreciate it's not. Growing up personally for me back in England, you know, as a kid, quite clearly, you know, there was a small ethnic minority background at the time when I was growing up as a kid. And sadly, I had to witness people coming in and out of my life, people around me in my communities. You know, we're talking skinheads. We're talking people like Combat 18. We're talking BNP, EDL, skinheads. The list has progressed. The race has, you know, increased. It hasn't sadly reduced. And when I was like, say, 17, 18, you know, I'm witnessing people for the first time having relationships, I guess, within my community anyway, with people of a different minority. That was frowned upon back in the day. There were one or two couples that you would have having mixed relationships, but it was still frowned upon within society. Slowly it got a bit better. So in the back of my head, I'm thinking, wow, this is really nice. People are mingling, people are having relationships with intercultures. There's acceptance there. There's love there, there's uniting there, okay? And hopefully it will lead on further on in the generations that we will come to accept one another. But sadly, that doesn't seem to be the case. There seems to be more and more cases being brought to our attention that isn't the case. That racism, unfortunately, is unfolding to such a huge scale that nobody can sort it out anymore. Nobody can control it anymore. And none of us know the answers. Some of us, like I said, are passionate to the point where we're voicing our opinions, we're voicing our concerns, we're voicing our, disgust, and we're voicing the complete, breakdown of society and the community that we're living in. But sometimes, even though we're voicing it, we're not being heard. And there's a difference in that. I still don't know what the answers are. This is, becoming a frequent thing, and it's something that really does upset me as a person of colour. Whether I was colour or not, it would still upset me. I would like to live in a world where we have peace and we have harmony and we are getting on with each other. I'd like life, for us to be in some sort of utopia. I appreciate it's not utopia, but being racially profiled, killing another black person, for what? For what justification? I'm not sure. I really am not sure. But sadly, it leaves me in disharmony. It leaves me saddened. It leaves me with nothing but pain in my heart to see yet another person's life taken away so brutally with such force when there doesn't need to be. There was other ways of dealing with that situation. But more and more and more, we're being subjected to these types of incidents, and it has to stop. There has to be some sort of justification for these people, okay? Because, like I said before, it could be me tomorrow, it could be you tomorrow, it could be your little child tomorrow. They shouldn't have to grow up in fear. They shouldn't have to grow up thinking, next time I leave my house, I might be coming back in a coffin. That shouldn't be the thought on some parent's mind, or some, partner's mind, or a child's, or a nephew or grandparent. It shouldn't be. We should be living in peace and we should be living in harmony, and sadly we're not. I really hope that we find some solution to this. I hope that things will improve for the better, but sadly, they're not going to happen that way. But for now, I wish you peace. I hope we find some resolution. But like many of you out there, I'm at a loss as well. And I can only sit here, I can pray. That's all I can do. God bless, take care.